do you think that's more common to have more, I'm going to use drama, more of a difficult experience when it's a blended family?
Which camera? Absolutely. That is some of the most contested and most contentious cases I have, is where there is a surviving spouse, and that surviving spouse is not the parent of the adult children. And it's just the person in common was the person that passed away. That was the person everyone loved. And so everyone played nice while that person was here, and then when that person is gone, it's the gloves come off. And so kudos to him for doing some planning. Even if you needed some clarification, he had at least done planning. In those instances, planning is so key.
Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you back to another episode of the Thank Me Later show with me, your host, Jini Thornton, where we help you master your money and transform your life. So I'm super excited because we are continuing our conversation today. So we're going to have a little mastery and transformation in the area of estate planning. So if you're new to this show, thank you. We are so happy that you're here. Thank you for engaging with us. If you have been consuming our content for a while, we appreciate you. So please share it. Of course, we want you to subscribe, but we also want your comments too. Any particular topics you want us to cover, any certain feedback, we would absolutely love to hear from you. So before we jump into our topic today, again, part 2 of estate planning, I'm going to take a minute and introduce our amazing guest today. We're going to have a really good, it's going to be a little deep, y'all. Might get a little deep. We'll have a deep conversation today, but wanted to take a minute and introduce our guest. So first, I want to welcome back Olivia Smith.
Thanks.
Hey, Olivia. Good to see you again. So Olivia is a partner of SR Law Group, which is a boutique law firm providing adoptions, estate planning, and other related legal services that focuses a lot on the needs of the elderly and families in general. She has been practicing law for 15 years and also is a key member of our amazing event, Black Women Will. Thank you for partnering with us on Black Women Will and just being such an advocate in the estate planning space.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Happy that you're here. So happy to welcome to the conversation Yvette Thibodeaux. Hey, Yvette.
Hello.
So happy that you're here with us today. Yvette is the Chief Strategist at Wisdom and Wit, where she helps businesses with program management, strategic planning, and organizational architecture. She has over 25 years of experience working within partnerships with Fortune 100 companies and has been recognized as an outstanding mentor by Pathfinders, Inc. I know Yvette because I am a member of Impact Church. Her husband, Paul Thibodeaux, is the lead pastor over at Impact Church. I also like to mention that Yvette is the mother of not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 6 sons. Woo-hoo. 6 sons. You get extra points just for that.
Yes. Yes.
You have earned that. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And it's interesting having the both of you here today because I want to tell the story of how the three of us got connected. So my husband, David, and I, we were on vacation and my cell phone rings. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, this is Impact Church. I'm like, this is Paul Thibodeaux, lead pastor. What? Like, wait a minute. What's happening? But Paul had left me a message and I called him back. And then he goes on to tell me the story about how his father-in-law had just passed away. And he was, because Black Women Will is hosted at Impact Church. And because of our work with Black Women Will, I have to tell you that I was honored that you all called me. Yeah. You know, that just meant so much. And he called, but I'm thinking, I'm not a lawyer. You know what I mean? I could connect you to who you need to connect to. Yeah. But I really appreciated Paul reaching out, sharing the story of your stepfather who passed away. Stepfather, I'm going to call him your father, who passed away. And after hearing your story, I immediately connected you to Olivia.
Yes.
And so that's how the three of us actually got connected. So if you would just kind of tell the story, Yvette, of, what was kind of unfolding and how you all ended up connecting to me and then on to Olivia.
Sure. So he was like my dad, and after he was in the hospital for about 30 days, and when he passed away, it still felt sudden. And while Daddy had a will and had things laid out, we are a blended family. So this was a second marriage for both of them, children from a previous marriage. While they blended well, the kids did not. And so there were phone calls and questions coming, trying to get things shortly after Daddy passed. And as Mom's looking at documents, she wasn't clear on what's a trustee and what's an executor, and just wanted to give her clarity so that she could process her grief in the right way and not concern herself with all that. And so that's when I knew I needed the help. And Paul said, I know who I can reach out to. I'll reach out to Jini. And then you connected me to Olivia to help me answer those questions and to get my mother really, my goal was to keep her wanting to live and not have the weight of my father's passing and the grief. And even with the planning in front of her, not have to be burdened down with how she needs to make those decisions or what it all means. I wanted to simplify that process for her. And so that was what was wonderful about being able to connect with both of you.
And so I know when you and I talked, I was really grateful for you just really sharing your story because I got the background. And that's the thing. I was teasing Olivia before. Now, whenever I call her, most of the time, we are in crisis.
Yes.
Something is unfolding and is happening pretty quickly too. Even if you kind of know that it's imminent, when it happens, everyone is like, go.
Yes.
And so she has really become my go-to. And so again, I was happy to hear your story, and I could tell the love that you had for your father. But it was clear that nothing was going down on your watch as it related to your mother.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there was no question about that. And I felt that, and like I said, I didn't know you, but that was crystal clear for me. So I'm like, this woman does not play about her mama.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to have order very, very quickly.
Yes.
So when the two of you started talking initially, like what were some of the key concerns? Because normally when someone passes away right away and there are documents in place, because you're thinking, oh, this is a layup.
Right.
Like things should be like, what are we concerned about here? Like this is simple.
Yeah, so my parents, while married, they had a mine and ours. So there was very little in joint names. They put everything in one shared account to pay bills that were common. So there wasn't clarity on property. There wasn't clarity of what happens when Daddy dies if he's on the deed. What kind of deed did we have? So while there were documents, it wasn't really clear as people started coming saying they had rights to things or I should have access to things, to really clarify what those legal documents really meant and how we could protect. My concern was at this point, now that Daddy's gone, how do we adjust what you've planned for, Mom? And how do we care for now the property and assets that you had to jointly that are now yours, and which one are not automatically yours? And so having that clarity was what Olivia brought to me to help me understand now how to help my mother adjust her estate planning, because now she doesn't have the spouse. So wherever those things were identified, she needed to be able to make sure she was protected and cared for. So for most of it, it was really the property, the physical assets, and 2 pieces of property that they owned together to figure out what do we do.
Right. And Olivia, do you think it's more common to have more, I'm going to use drama, more of a difficult experience when it's a blended family?
Which camera? Absolutely. That is some of the most contested and most contentious cases I have, is where there is a surviving spouse, and that surviving spouse is not the parent of the adult children. And it's just the person in common was the person that passed away. That was the person everyone loved. And so everyone played nice while that person was here, and then when that person is gone, it's the gloves come off. And so kudos to him for doing some planning. Even if you needed some clarification, he had at least done planning. In those instances, planning is so key.
You know, I always say it, in blended families, all bets are off at death.
Absolutely.
And so when people have learned to behave and learn to be polite, one of my favorite uncles always had this saying, if you could sleep with them, the least I could do is eat with them. So people have learned to eat with people.
Yes.
And then they realize they don't have to eat with them anymore.
Yeah.
And then death always brings out the worst. Not always, but it
It does.
often brings out the worst. No, it does.
Well, I think what it does is there's a lot of, if you don't live into your relationships well, when that person dies, then all the emotions of that not living into that relationship well come to the surface, and you're grasping for things, right? Because that reality has hit home. So to your point, it's about who's the glue because you love them.
Yes.
So when my father passed, while he has four surviving children, I planned his funeral because I lived in the house and had the longest tenure with him, though I was the stepdaughter.
Right.
So I took the burial and put what's on his tombstone. And so, but the emotions of the other siblings who might not have been as connected came to the surface. And so now I'm going to grasp at things because I can't rectify, I can't say the things I didn't resolve while that person was
With that
living.
relationship.
And so it becomes more of emotional than really for me what I've learned and what you got from me when I called was, this is a biblical thing. This is a practical thing. This leaving a legacy and passing it on. It's been around for years to take care of the next generation. Right. And so you got to remove the emotion, even on what's delegated to whom and what. It's about who has the best stewardship to do what's going to be best to continue the legacy. And so that was what I wanted to do. That's what I felt Daddy would have wanted me to do.
And so, Yvette, did you feel that your parents had done a good job of communicating with you adult children?
No.
So clearly they had documents in place.
Yeah.
You felt like your parents were on one accord.
No. So for 10 years, I probably kept coming over and going, all of us could be cray-cray, right? Who knows what's going to happen when one of you die? Daddy, I don't want Mom to die, and I might hit my head and come over here and go, I should be living in this house with you. This is my mother's house. Or I want her car. Or I want this that belonged to my mother. Same thing in my family. If my dad died, I didn't want people coming over to the house, which happened. I want to get in to get something. I'm coming to collect something. And I said, so please document. But then because, again, they were blended together, but not their children, those things were done with your children in conversation, not with my mother at the table and then your children. And so, again, me thinking biblically, you leave your family and you cleave to your wife. Right. And so that decision wasn't shared necessarily or agreed upon, but it was done and an acceptance of it. Ideally, you would like for both adults to come together and agree. But at the end of the day, because they combined only to pay common bills and kept separate.
Everything else was separate.
Then he could dictate what he wanted and have a conversation after the fact. Right. So there was some discovery.
Because he didn't have to have a conversation with your mom because those assets had his name on it.
And that's how they managed things, right? The car was only in one person's name. You bought yours, I bought mine. But we paid the mortgage together. So I put my half in the bank, you put your half. We did a lot of that, not thinking. And that's why I was so adamant every year, all the time. I went to see my parents probably every other weekend. And I go, hey, how's that estate planning coming?
Right.
Make it easy. I said, I want to grieve you and celebrate you. Right. I don't want to be figuring out a whole bunch of things. I don't want to find the document. I want you to sit us all down as best you can and explain it, own it, and let the emotions come out now than rather the living, surviving spouse having to deal with everybody's emotions of the surprise.
Right. Now that your father has passed away, do you think there's anything that you could have done differently to get them to get to the family meeting now that you've had some time to reflect on that?
No, I think it's more because, again, the children and his children and my siblings, we just didn't have any relationship.
There was no relationship at all.
So I think that was what makes, like, to your point, blended very, we call it either potpourri or blended. You can choose which one you're going to have. We had potpourri. That we could have probably never sat in the room. I can only remember one time that we all came together, and that was Dad's 80th birthday.
What is potpourri in the context of family? I've never heard that before.
So potpourri is all these different things all in there.
Just mixed.
It's just all mixed, but it's not homogeneous and blended.
Not blended.
Yes. Okay. Blended means we have meshed to a common vision, plan, thought process, way of doing things.
Thank
we
you
did
for
not do
teaching
that.
me that
Yes.
today.
Yes.
So, Olivia, when you hear Yvette say that her parents, since this is second marriage, mom's name is on X, dad's name is on Y. Do you see that? Is that pretty common in blended second marriages?
It can be, for sure. Maybe they had bad experiences the first time around, and so the second time around they want to make sure that whatever they bring in, it stays theirs. And so especially when they are each bringing children into the equation as well.
And so how are you advising clients, Olivia? So someone is doing their planning.
Yes.
And there's this blended family. How are you advising them how to handle adult children in these situations? And we're talking about adult kids can range from 20 to
absolutely
60. So what's your advice?
It's what Yvette said. You have to have the tough conversation. You have to sit everyone down. If you need to talk to some people to the side first, then do that. Yeah. But you have to let everyone know what we've put in place, right? Usually couples come in and they plan together. So they know what they've put in place, but no one else knows. And so you have to have those tough conversations with your family members. And so sometimes, we'll kind of walk them through what that looks like. And these are the things you should share. And maybe you should even share maybe a copy of some of the documents so everyone is on the same page. No one is surprised when you pass away, and they are not grieving and then also angry because they thought that they were entitled to a certain thing that you're not leaving them. And so they also then have the opportunity to ask you questions like, why are you leaving this to her and not me? And then you can explain instead of leaving it for your family who don't know the answers to those questions after you've passed away.
Yeah.
Even I remember one thing that we talked about was there was an element of surprise in the context of the executor.
Yeah.
So, the executor, y'all, that's the person who has the job of wrapping up the final affairs, paying for the funeral, paying the final bills, closing the cell phone account, whatever's all the business that needs to be wrapped up. So I remember you kind of getting your footing after that. But one thing that I thought about in our conversation was, people don't understand the job of the executor. No. That does not mean you get the money.
It does not.
You do not get the money. You have a job to do.
You get to do the work.
You get to do That's what that means. And so I think that was part of the disconnect. Do you think after our conversation?
Oh, absolutely.
That was it?
And really trying to help my mother understand the care. She's 82. Understanding the care that Daddy took to put somebody else as the executor to wrap that up. While it's been a little contentious in the wrapping it up because they didn't understand the role, at least that falls on somebody else. So we have been quick to send everything to them. So there's no more emails coming. There's no more phone calls coming. There's no more polite. We express our condolences, but there's a balance due.
Right.
So all of that we get to hand off to a much younger person who Daddy left in charge to close out his affairs. So again, I think what Daddy was trying to do and what we are very focused on is, Mom, God chose you to live. Let's keep living.
Right.
And so he has cared for you wonderfully. You had already had assets that would care for you wonderfully. We're not going to get stuck. We're going to keep living. So grieve through your grieving process, but these things don't have to weigh you down.
Right.
Let them care for that. And let them handle probate or whatever else comes with this very long and tedious process. But every day you get to wake up and go, I'm good.
Right. Yeah.
And every day let's get back and get into that good, especially for my mom who had been caring for my dad with Parkinson's for several years. And that's a heavy burden.
Especially, yes.
Physically, yes. So just to watch, when somebody's doing that kind of weighted work, you don't notice what it weighs on them because you don't see it. But then once Daddy left, and I looked at pictures, I went, oh my gosh, my mother's been carrying a huge burden.
Yes.
And so now it's like, let's celebrate some things. Let's live a little bit. Let's get back to life.
Olivia, I was just thinking, I've seen people jockey, wanting to be the executor. And is that a conversation that you really have to explain to people? Like, wait. It's not all fun and games over here.
It is no fun and games. There are no fun and games. You have the responsibility and everyone's looking at you and waiting.
Right.
And so that is a conversation that I have with people when they are planning. Who is the person best situated for this job that not only have the skills to handle the business, but have the people skills to deal with the other beneficiaries, because everyone is going to be looking at that person wanting to know when they're going to get their distribution.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, it is not a fun position for sure.
You know, as I had to be the executor a few times, I describe it as the job that you never want.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You may be the most qualified for it, but you're not like, please pick me.
Yes.
I want it. No, you don't. No, you don't. So there's a lot to come with that. Yvette, I was thinking, preparing to see you today, with you all having a leadership role in a major church. Like, you all are on the front row of death and passing away. Because a lot of times it's you all getting the first call.
Yes.
You're the first call. Such and such has passed away. I'm curious about your experience, because I'm sure you all have seen everything. I think you have probably witnessed families who things have been beautiful and order and just straight up craziness.
Yeah.
What has that experience been in that role from a church perspective?
It's trying to care for folks and get them to keep making the decisions that still need to be made. They scramble just to know if there's burial. What do I do? I mean, some can't even get to the funeral home to make some of the very basic decisions because they don't know where paperwork is or documentation. I experienced that even with Daddy being in the military. Oh my gosh, finding the D-14 or whatever was like, oh my gosh, why didn't Daddy leave a copy somewhere so I could do his military? I mean, there's a whole lot that people don't even think about just to get to the funeral home. And so when they don't have that, they're calling us experiencing grief and trying to plan a funeral, but they haven't started with just even the funeral home because they can't locate paperwork. They don't know how they're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot, and we're just trying to care for them emotionally, but also help them know you've got to move through this process so that you can. What we find is until that day that person is buried. I remember growing up, you would always only have a funeral on Saturday. You died on Saturday, they would wait until next Saturday because they wanted all the family to come to town. And now we've realized that prolongs the grieving process and the beginning of healing. And so we're trying to help people get back to living and to move on and to celebrate someone's life. And so the sooner you can get them, it sounds kind of callous, but the sooner you can get them moving in that direction, the better for them. But it becomes very emotional. You actually see disagreements that happen and play out at funerals because there's concern about where the documents are. And like you said, the executor, people sometimes believe that as soon as someone dies that you start distribution the very next day. And that's not the case, right? And so people are waiting like the next day, like there's going to be a reading of the will and I'll get my money. And so you see that playing out sometimes in the emotions of people of saying so-and-so's coming, but we're not talking. So can you sit them here? And so we are the glue that kind of helps everybody stay focused and centered on why are we here and how do we get to celebrating a life.
I can only imagine what you all have experienced because it is supposed to be, a beautiful time to celebrate someone's life, but with under all that stress and duress. Yeah, I can. How difficult that has got to be to keep people trying to keep them focused on the point. But it's hard to focus on the point when you can't pay for the funeral. You can't find the life insurance. You're disagreeing with your sister who just flew in from, God knows where. Emotions are high.
Who's riding in the limo becomes a big debate.
Oh my God. I have seen that. Yes.
Are we having 2 or 3?
Yes.
Does this person get to ride? And so all of that in the emotion and the rawness of somebody's passing, you're amazed, but that plays out. And you've got to have that level-headed person who says, let's just care well for everybody. And even for like my dad, knowing we were the Potpourri family, Daddy was buried at another church, not at Impact, because they were members of another church that my step-siblings had never been to. Well, learning what I've learned about funerals, I sent pictures of them to the church first and said, hey, you guys know us and are going to love on us. I need you to love equally on these faces because they've chosen not to ride with us in the limo. which means they're going to get there early. They are grieving the loss of their father, just like we are. Treat them the same.
Right.
And so somebody's got to be level-headed
Right.
to do that, to avoid
Right.
the opportunity for the contention. Somebody's got to die to self.
Right.
Yes.
And so I sent the photos and said, hey, they're going to get there before us. Love on them.
Right.
And so that's when there's that tension, that's where the church has to play a role when people share that. And so our care ministry and just seeing what we've seen really is so important for us to play that role, because we know what's coming after that burial once they leave the cemetery. Then the real work,
Absolutely.
the real emotion, the real
bets are
sense of
off.
urgency,
Yes.
right? The how are we going to pay for? Are we okay financially? The flood of questions about just everybody's livelihood comes into play.
Do you feel, and this is not just in the context of Impact, first of all, the church that I'm a member of, I have been 10 years or plus, shout out Impact.
Yes, yes.
But do you feel that the church overall is equipped to help people navigate the financial side of all of this?
No.
Yeah. Because I mean, I understand the emotional side and the
Yeah.
spiritual side and helping prepare for the service, but
Right.
there's like a bajillion questions that people are
Right.
coming to you all for. I'm like, how can you fill the gap of that for people?
Yeah, and that's why it's important. I think churches are learning to have partnerships and collaborations like we do Black Women Wills. All of those things are so important because you can't be all things,
Right. Yeah.
but you can attach people to all things that they need. And so I think the church has learned to be a conduit to connect and have those resources. What you learn, then you figure out a place to go deposit that people so they can get the support they need. And so I think that's why Impact does what we do with you, and other churches I'm sure have some kind of connection that where do I send this person with these kinds of questions? How do I guide them? Because the church has become kind of like a 911.
Yeah.
We're in crisis.
Yeah.
Where do I go? Can I?
Absolutely.
And so we've learned that we don't have to be the answer, but we have to have a means to connect people to some of those answers.
Yeah.
You have to have the resources. No, thank you for sharing that. I just,
Yeah.
just the role that you two have of again, 'cause you're frontline workers.
Yeah.
You know, and having the demeanor, the heart for that work, because we have to get the work done,
Yes.
but we have to do the work in a certain type of way. Yeah. So, y'all, we're going to transition to the Thank Me Later hotline call. We have someone who has a question.
Hi, my name is Jordan from New Orleans. My dad is still living and he's 84 years old. He doesn't have a will in place, and I tell him all the time that he needs one, but he doesn't want to hear it. He says because I'm an only child that I will be fine, but I've seen instances where people have gone through probate and end up with nothing. I want to be proactive, but I can tell it's a sensitive subject for my father, and he's also very stubborn. What should I do, and where can I start?
Stubborn. I can see that. I can see that.
I can definitely see that. There is no silver bullet. Like, there is no one thing or one solution. What I would say is frame it in the way that the impact it's going to have on you once he passes away, and how you're going to be grieving and how sad you're going to be, and then what this burden would be trying to figure out where his assets are, what to do next, and try to partner with him. I get this question all the time. Friends call, they've watched a podcast or they've seen a presentation. They're like, I try to talk to my parents. They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to tell me where their assets are. It's an ongoing conversation, and so it can be overwhelming to a parent or grandparent. So start the conversation and keep revisiting the conversation. And maybe you get a little more information each time you have the conversation with your dad, but don't give up because you do not want to be searching through papers and files and filing cabinets trying to find everything that dad owned and his accounts. So keep having the conversation and get the little by little get the information that you need. And eventually, let's hope that he gets to the point where he's ready to actually do an estate plan as well.
Yeah.
Yvette, I'm curious, how has this impacted you having certain types of conversations with your adult children?
Very much so, because now I'm in the potpourri blended, now moved to blended. And so And I have a unique that I have 2 generations of children, right? So I have children that are grown and gone, and then I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old at home. And so really having those conversations, ever since we got pregnant with our last 2, we started having conversations because we said, if we get hit by a bus, who's mature enough to take over and have custody? Who's wise enough? And we're making them and having Paul and I the difficult conversations about who's most equipped.
Yeah.
Because with 6 children, some are able and some are not so gifted and able. And so we're having to have the real honest conversations of who will do well with those assets. Again, it's about leaving the legacy that it continues to increase and grow and not just get spent away. And so we continue to have those conversations. And you know what? As your children grow, things shift. We revisit the conversations of what might need to change. So we work through that regularly. We are very honest and candid. But to be honest, we've been honest the whole time, that you are not all equal, but you are all equally loved. But how we display that love and what we do with that love is going to be very different. And so it's conversations we've had as a total family from day one.
Love that.
And so what love looks like to one is not going to be what we're working hard to give you as love, because that's not the way you receive love. And so we have the honest conversations about who's going to be in charge of what. Nothing's hidden. And we set expectations. And we explain to you why you might not get certain things. So there's always an opportunity to change and improve. But I've watched too many people leave a house to someone, and in 6 years they've lost the house.
Yeah. If 6 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my mother's neighborhood is older, and there's so many of those houses that the people who lived there died, and now somebody has taken that house. And so we're going to be mindful of that. I didn't work this hard to build these things up for you to let somebody else have them. If you don't want them, then do something with them, but we're not going to lose them, and you reap no benefit of them whatsoever. And so it's really having those conversations. We joke because the oldest believes I should be in charge of everything, and I'm like, maybe not so much.
Right.
Maybe not so much.
Birth order. What does that have to do with anything?
Right. And the youngest who probably will want to be in charge. So we have honest conversations about how personalities are going to show up. We've had it with my sisters. There's, I'll say, oh my gosh, you're so emotional. When mom goes, I'm just going to stay home. Give me 48 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so having those jokingly, but while it's still not raw, is important, because then everybody knows our place in our space and owns it. So we're doing that for our children as well.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about today was there's always so much emphasis on the assets and, money and land, and which is certainly important, because that's certainly a part of our legacy. Sure. But, a big part of the will is to determine who's going to take care of our minor children.
Yes.
Or who's going to take care of our adult children who have special needs.
Yes.
And I think people forget about that. Yeah. And I'm like, how can you all not have a plan in place if something happens to you or both of you at the same time? Like, who is going to step in? Absolutely. And I just remember, our children are 29 and 33, who we had picked as the guardian of our children, that changed.
Yes.
When we came into a different season, and we had to make some different, we had to make some adjustments. But I didn't want there to be any confusion about that, because I'm like, it's already hard enough if a child has lost their parent not to know who is going, where that's crystal clear, and that we've made that decision. And so I'm curious, Olivia, how are you advising people when you're picking the custodian, you're picking the person who's going to raise your kids? Like, what tips or advice are you giving folks?
So one of the things, it's important, because we were just talking about birth order. People come in with an idea of who is supposed to, or who is supposed to be in that role. And one of the things I tell clients is, who is the person that would raise your kids as close to like you as you would raise them? That is one thing to keep in mind. Who, you may be really close to your parents, but if things play out, like, your parents may not be here. They may be old. You have young children. And so they may not be able to keep up with those children in the same way. They may not have the same amount of patience, to deal with smaller children. And so really thinking of the qualities that are important to you and making sure that the people that you choose have those qualities and that have a relationship with your kids. It is traumatic to lose a parent, and then even more traumatic to then go to a house with someone you're not close to, that you don't know, that you don't have your own relationship with as a kid. And so those are some of the things that when parents, and that is one of the most difficult things when parents come in to do estate planning, is them figuring out who's going to care for their kids. But those are some of the things I ask them to keep in mind and make sure you ask that person. Let me start there. Make sure you ask that person, and that person is willing to be a guardian of your child.
Yvette, one thing that I've noticed having some conversation with people who have younger kids, I have a colleague in particular, 2 boys as well. I think they are like 5 and 7 or something. But because she does not want to have that tough conversation with her husband, they have not put a plan in place.
Wow.
And I'm like, because I'm thinking she would want the children to go to someone in her family. Her husband is thinking something different.
Yes.
So any advice for couples who may be at an impasse for such an important decision? Because I'm like, we're talking about my kids. Oh, we're going to talk about this. Like, we can't tiptoe around this.
Yeah, I think it's the practical things that you laid out. It's the who's really going to be able to raise them in the way. You know, we tend to fall into this godparent thing, but we really just pick a friend.
Right.
We're not anticipating dying. Who are the cool people we hang out with? We're not going to die. You're not going to get them.
Kids,
and then God forbid, something does happen.
Right.
I think it's the practical who could. My mother lost her parents very early. And back in the day, you just went to the nearest relative who said yes. That doesn't work anymore. That nearest relative is probably like, I'm not ready for that.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And so I do. You have practical conversations about demeanor, how they raise their children, what happens in their household. We had those tough conversations because we didn't initially think the same person either. It was like, pick a name, and we were not on the same. And then I think sometimes it, just like anything else in a marriage, it comes down to who's willing to compromise and say, let's hope it doesn't happen. But I concede to the one who's primarily doing that role today in the household. So if the mom has the relationship with the children and does primary rearing, then you may need to lean to that discovery and that decision because that's who's doing it and recognizes what the children need most. Right. But I think it's going to come down to just having to have a compromise. I don't think there's any way to say I'm going to give up.
Right.
I'm just going to have to concede that maybe I'll do it that way. And again, in 2 years, like you did, things could change, right? Yeah. So this is for what we think now. We revisit it. To your point, do you have the energy? My boys are on travel baseball.
Oh, my gosh.
We know now,
right?
Because we did children second time in life. All of our friends are laughing at us going, we played baseball with your kids when our first set of kids. Right. We're not trying to come play baseball now in our 50s and 60s and do travel ball every weekend. And so we know that. And ironically, we would choose somebody who's younger. And having been around young people, there are youth that are now adults that would be better suited than people who are our age to do that for our children, because there's nobody in my 50, 60-year-old cluster of friends that are going to be, I'm going to go run and do baseball every weekend and do all that and go to prom and drive here and teach it. No, there's a whole lot. And so you have to give real good thought to what are you really asking them to take on.
I like how practical you are because, of course, we're thinking about the big things, the religious belief in education, but that's a big part of who a kid is. All the activities and friends and things. Like, you don't want a child's life to be impacted because the person you picked is like, I didn't sign up for all of this.
Well, and you have to know your children. So my Noah is 10. He does not like to eat out. And most people in their 50s and 60s are eating out, right? And so if I gave Noah to somebody, that would be an emotional thing for him that, oh my God, we don't get home cooked meals. We don't, because that's how he's been reared and that's what he desires and loves. And so even that kind of weighs into the decision because that's what my child's going to expect.
Right. So Olivia, I'm curious, for the parents who don't make the decision, God forbid, both parents are deceased. where do the children go?
So hopefully there is a family member that will volunteer, or a friend that will volunteer, and then they have to go through court to get some sort of official order that says that they are the legal guardian. If both parents are gone, if the one parent's gone, it goes to the other parent. But if both parents are gone, there is no person after that.
So what happens though if you have two different relatives who are fighting? Because I've seen that happen too. Two different sides of the family. No, they're coming with me. No, they're coming with me. How does the court decide if there has been no will to dictate that?
So as with most things for children, is what is in the best interest. And so they're probably going to go to some of those practical things. Does one live in state and one live out of state?
So the judge is going to
make the decision.
Mm.
Wow.
Mm. Can you imagine having folks in your business like that deciding what's going to happen with your kid? They don't know your
that
children.
Don't really know your family.
Right.
Yeah.
And your child is a file at this point. It's a file.
Or just the emotions of the children having to answer all the questions to help make the decision. I mean, because that's a lot of interviewing and sitting your child who's grieving to kind of assess them as well.
So the reason why we are talking about this is because this is why you need a will.
Yeah.
You know, and you are, because God forbid, you know, more than likely it probably won't happen this way, but in the event it does, at least you know that there's a plan in place.
Yes.
And it's what you wanted, is what you have determined what is best for your children. Like my mother always say, keep them folks out of your business. You know, and she meant it. You know, now you got some other folks dictating what is going to happen to your children. We're not talking about a house now or some land.
The most precious.
The most precious. Someone else is going to make this decision. Yeah. So please take this really, really seriously. And if for no other reason, make the investment to make sure that you make these decisions. And like you lady said, and please have the conversation with the people who you are listing in your paperwork.
Yeah.
Please.
I have seen people like, what? What's happening here?
Right.
It's not fair to do that to the kids or the people that you are expecting, you know.
What will happen is, I had a call last week and they said, we were named as executor. How do we get out of this?
Wow.
Really?
I do not want to be the executor. Nobody told me that I was.
No, thank you.
And so it's as if you didn't do any planning, right? Because now you're back with no one, because the people you picked are like, no, I did not sign up for this.
One thing that I wanted to reinforce based on something, Yvette, that you said before we get ready to wrap up. I just appreciated what you talked about having an ongoing conversation with your children, because one and done is not enough.
No.
It's not enough. And so this fly by night, we have a conversation, we tuck the documents away, we have a conversation, and we go on with life. That is completely unrealistic. Yeah. So certainly you do not have to talk about it every day, nor do you have to talk about it every holiday, but you need to be intentional at least once, maybe twice a year, where you're having a conversation, because things change, you know.
Birthdays and anniversaries.
I have a very good friend, when they're all together around Christmas, they have a little check-in, family meeting time. Then you can go back to the festivities and fun and fellowship and food and all of that. Yeah. But you need to be that intentional that you're going to check in with it. You know, it is. It's kind of like a fire drill. You didn't do a fire drill in school one time, and then it was over. No, you did it every year, maybe a couple of times a year, because you want to kind of keep it fresh.
Absolutely.
And so I do the same thing with my kids too. I'm like, no, pull out your phone. No, who's the lawyer? Can you call? You know what I mean? Right. Who's the accountant? Who do you call first? Where are the documents? No. We're going to where they are. Mom, I know you know, but we're going to keep doing this every single time, because I need it to be a reflex. Like if it's time to, you know, jump into action, you're ready to do that for sure. So I appreciated you saying that.
And I mean, I've watched my mother go through bins of paper.
Oh my God.
And that's painful to watch. Every day I talk to her, she says, I'm going through some more paperwork. I need y'all to do the 7-year rule. Throw it out, shred it, let's go.
No.
Oh my gosh.
My God.
Oh, and so it's like, how do you even know that's the most current, Mom?
Right.
You know?
And then think about it. Your mom is in her 80s and retired. What if you're still working?
Yeah.
And you got a life and you're travel baseball and you got all this stuff. Who has time to do all of that? So you're supposed to do that and live your regular life too?
Right.
No. The answer to that is no.
You have to have like that Bible of all the accounts, this, that, or the
Yes.
other, because there were documents that came up that I was like, that's not even valid anymore. Okay, let's shred.
Right.
That policy was canceled a long time ago,
Right.
but nobody kept it current, so you're having to touch every single piece of this paperwork.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we're really focused on with, Black Women Will and Thank Me Later, our foundation, is organization.
Yes.
Like that's 101. You need to have your documents in place, certainly, but do you know what it means for people to know exactly where to go?
Yes.
Where everything is like this? We shared earlier this year that we had our first Black Woman Will person to pass away that we know about, 37 years old.
Wow.
37 years old, had a 3-year-old daughter. She was killed by her husband.
Oh.
And she had gotten documents done at Impact in 2022, came back in 2023 and got her documents updated with us. And what was beautiful, though, her whole friend group had come together.
Yeah.
And we give everybody this bright pink this bright pink folder. And when they went to her house, everybody was like, where's the folder?
Yeah.
And they all knew, and they found it. But because they had been through the experience together, so immediately they were able to jump right into action. And I was just so grateful for that. We couldn't prevent the situation from happening, but I just felt so good that now people are empowered, and literally the day after her death, they were moving into action immediately. And so that meant a lot.
When Paul's mom passed, she was in Chicago, and she left everything. If I go first, here's the folder. If Daddy goes first. So within a week, she didn't want to be embalmed. So you have to be buried within 48 hours.
Right.
So she died on Sunday. We had her funeral on Tuesday. We had filed all paperwork, did everything. And by Friday, we left, and Daddy kept living. And we never had to revisit anything. She was that organized.
Isn't that amazing?
That's
And
amazing.
so we thought Daddy's going to crumble. Mom's been here. They were married 60 plus years. But because she did it so well and planned it
so well.
she had all the instructions about her funeral, where to go. We were able to fly in Sunday night, view the body on Monday, bury her graveside on Tuesday, get Daddy the paperwork, file everything, and be back in Atlanta before the end of the week and know
That's
that Daddy
amazing.
lived
And
several
Olivia,
years.
I just can't wait till we get to the point where we're not in awe, where this
Yes,
is the norm.
where this is the norm.
Where this is the
yes,
norm.
yes.
Yeah.
Where this
'Cause
is
it
the
can
norm.
be.
Because it can be the norm. I was sharing with Olivia before. When my mother passed away, I knew where everything was, every person I need to call, every decision had been made, the funeral home, the order of the service, who could sing, who was going to speak. Done. It was all finished, wrapped up. Like there was nothing to do.
amazing.
Yeah.
There was nothing to do. I had a very good friend, Jewish friend. His mom died on Monday. Tuesday before sundown, buried.
Yes.
I was like, how did they move this quickly? Beautiful, because you're thinking, because it's so foreign to us,
Yeah.
it's like they had 6 months to plan it. It was the most beautiful service I have ever been to. I was like, this is incredible. But it can be done. It can be done. So as we get ready to wrap up, any final words, anything that you'd like to share, Olivia? Anything on your mind?
No. I think that is the perfect way to end.
know.
Like this is how it can be.
It can be. That's the standard. That's the standard. You have set the standard. Any final words, Yvette, before we wrap up?
I just think the communication's the key. Like you said, have the conversation, do the work, take the emotion out of it on this side while they're living, and get down to the practical decisions about your children, your wealth, your assets, everything, so that your legacy continues in the right way. We call them celebration of lives now, not funerals.
Right.
Allow people to celebrate your life and keep living.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And blended families, you have some additional work to do.
Yes.
So do it. Do it. There's no other way around it. So before we wrap up, I want you to finish this sentence.
Okay.
Yvette, I'm going to ask you first. Okay. If you blank, you will thank me later. If you what?
If you have the conversations with your children, you will thank me later.
You will thank me later.
I was going to say the same
What, did she
thing.
steal your answer?
If you have the tough conversations, you'll thank me later.
Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So thank you all for coming today. It means so much. And for those of you who do need some legal guidance, please, and you're in Georgia, I'm sorry if you're outside of Georgia, you can't help folk outside of Georgia.
I may be able to refer you.
You can refer them,
yes.
but she practices in Georgia. She's barred in Georgia. That's important to note. You know, who you work with is going to have to be barred in a certain place. But please share your website, social media, and everything so people know how to get in touch with you.
Sure. So SR Law Group, our website is srlawgrp.com. Phone number 404-410-6505. We have a podcast called Black Parents Aging. It is for people like me with aging parents and you with aging parents, helping us navigate that changing landscape. And you can find us on all social media.
Thank you for that. I am going to do a little shameless plug for Impact Church, though. Okay. Been a proud member of Impact Church over in East Point, Georgia, over 10 years, 2323 Sylvan Road.
Yes.
And also just grateful that is our host place for Black Women Will. We'll be back in November.
Yay.
Again, we're super excited about that. November 16th for the 4th annual, and looking forward to impacting Black families for generations in partnership with Impact Church. So grateful for the partnership and grateful to be able to serve the Impact community. And it's a beautiful space. You know, it's a really beautiful space. So for us, of course, you can engage with us on social media at TML Money, and of course with me personally at Jini Thornton. And thank you. We're so grateful that you have tuned into another episode of the Thank Me Later Show with me, Jini Thornton, and we will see you next episode. Thank you, everybody.